Conservative Party and the Unionist Party. We have, yes. We have Monica Hamidi from Labour. I'm really sorry to report to you that Clive Jones from the Liberal Democrats, I'm afraid, is unwell, has been taken ill today. And so, let's start as we mean to go on, shall we? And so Prue Bray has very kindly stepped in at the last minute, so nice to see you, Prue. And we also welcome Colin Wright from Reform UK. Merv Boniface from the Green Party was not able to be here with us this evening. So right from the outset, I want to thank each one of our candidates for their willingness to serve and to represent the community of this constituency. We've already welcomed them, and that's right and proper. This is an event organised for the whole community by Churches Together in Wokingham. For Christians, love is at the heart of our faith. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we want to be like him in the whole of our lives, including tonight. With this in mind, our hope for this evening is that our time together will be characterised by love, respect, grace and peace, even when we disagree. This approach is in keeping with the 7 Nolan principles, which are the basis of the ethical standards expected of public office holders. And since I don't expect you've remembered those or learned them by heart, I will remind you what they are. 1 is selflessness, 2, integrity, 3, objectivity, 4, accountability, 5, openness, 6, honesty, and 7, leadership. So in keeping with the tone that we would like to adopt this evening, I would like to invite you, if you feel it's appropriate, you may clap. It's okay to be positive about things, that's great. But if you disagree with things, please do not boo. We would rather you didn't do that. Be positive. This evening is being recorded from a fixed camera, and the link will be shared hopefully this evening, so you'll be able to watch again later or tell those who haven't been able to be here then. Our evening tonight has 3 sections, and each of our candidates have been given the time parameters for each section. I shall be keeping faith with these timings, and this is important because we want to hear from all 4 candidates over a range of issues, and this is the best way we felt to use our time wisely. In the first section, each candidate will introduce the party they represent and why they are standing, and we're going to hear the candidates in the order that they appear here, and that has been determined by the drawing of lots. Okay? Section 2 is question time, and you've been filling in questions as you came. Thank you very much for that, that's brilliant. Each candidate has a maximum of 2 minutes to answer the questions, and they're going to be asked by the people who pose the questions as much as possible. There won't be opportunity for further comment from the audience or discussion amongst candidates, I'm afraid, because we want to be able to cover a fair amount of ground in the time we have. And then the last part of our evening will be the closing statements from each candidate, which will be in the reverse order that they have started this evening. So without further ado, please can I invite Lucy to begin? Thank you.
Crossroads as a community and as a country. We need a fresh, dynamic new MP who can offer a bright new future for Wokingham and our villages. Someone with the vision, the ability and the determination to really get things done. My name's Lucy. I grew up in a rural village in the suburbs of Hong Kong. Hong Kong was then the freest economy in the world, and I campaigned for democracy alongside many who are now political prisoners of Beijing. That gave me lifelong conviction in the value of economic and political freedom. My family and I are big believers in the power of good education, hard work and aspiration. My dad left his council estate on a scholarship and became a teacher and a small business owner. I've worked incredibly hard my whole life to build a successful business career. I've worked as a managing director in finance and technology, and I've stepped down from that role to campaign full-time as your parliamentary candidate. I'm also a mum of 2 lovely boys and a hard-working community volunteer, campaigner, and voluntary advisor to the government on economic policy to promote growth and prosperity. During the pandemic, I was asked to advise the Chancellor on funding schemes that saved hundreds of businesses, including many who are hardship profits and families. I've also volunteered for Citizens Advice on environmental conservation projects and as a mentor to young entrepreneurs. As your prospective MP, I've been out across the constituency 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, speaking with residents, community groups, charities and businesses. Everyone's been incredibly welcome and I'm so grateful for your kindness. People have told me of the love that they have for our area and for our country. I've also heard the very real frustrations that people experience daily. I know it's a really difficult time in politics. I'm often very frustrated by politics myself. That's why I'm stepping forward now to really try to make a difference and get things done. So I'm determined to promote a vibrant local economy, improve our local services, and protect our green spaces. I want to ensure that all hard-working people in this community can earn a great living. I want all of our children to receive an excellent education. I want to make government more effective, to unlock local infrastructure, to reform our NHS, to keep cutting crime, to protect our local environment, and to strengthen our national security. I'm also keen to ensure that we bring people together. I want to bring people together with a positive spirit of hope, collaboration, and community. Together, I know we can secure an incredibly bright future for our area. It's time for a new generation of politics, a dynamic, competent, caring generation. It's time to get things done for Wokingham, our villages, and our nation. Thank you very much.
And Monica.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to come and be part of this democratic conversation. I'm Monica Hamidi, and I'm proud to be standing Better?
Yes, much better.
Lovely.
Thank you. Okay, you're fine. Thank you, yes.
I'll start.
Start again. Yes, please do.
Good evening. Thank you for taking time to come and be part of this democratic conversation. I'm Monica Hamidi, and I'm proud to be standing as Labour's parliamentary candidate for Wokingham. I have worked as a caseworker for over 16 years and was first elected as a councillor in 2022. During these years, I have seen firsthand how much harder it has been for families to make ends meet with a Conservative government in power. I also run a small business, which I set up in 2017, and we now employ 7 people. When COVID hit, my business, just like so many others, faced challenges. So as a small business owner, I understand the support businesses need. I know how difficult it is to survive with the economic uncertainty that we are facing because of the Tories' mismanagement of the country's finances. I believe my experience as a caseworker and a councillor gives me the skills I need to be a voice for Wokingham and to represent everyone in our community. I strongly believe an active Member of Parliament is what Wokingham needs, and it would be a welcome change from the previous Conservative MP. So I ask you to consider your options, whether you want more of the same or more chaos with the Conservatives. Someone who will have no influence on government and takes your vote for granted, believing that the election results has already been decided, so step down as the leader of the council with the Liberal Democrats. Or whether you want change and an effective voice at the heart of government with a vote for Labour. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all. Thank you for attending, as my two colleagues have outlined. Let me talk about my affinity with Wokingham. I've lived in Wokingham and around Wokingham since 1979. Very different back in those days. The changes, the sprawl, the things we've seen. Some are propensity, some are a little bit of a backward step. My wife was born in Wokingham Hospital. My son went to the Forest School. I had a business here in Wokingham. We moved that out. I worked many, many years ago in the post office when I was 18 to 21. So many of you have been here in this time. I've knocked on your door previously. So thanks for the cups of tea in the past. Going back to where I reside nowadays, I consult for global software companies and creating their European operations. And one thing that teaches me is the ability to scale. Wokingham has a huge propensity to grow. But from seeing Hustings this week, one thing we've all got to look at here is politics is tribal. It's like football. It shouldn't be tribal. You have 4 different parties here that all have fantastic ideas. Why can't we take those ideas at face value and put them into context? Why do we have to have first past the post? Why cannot we have proportional representation where the good ideas from all of you, regardless of which party, come to the fore for that advantageous of the community? But it's not about me, it's about you. It's about an MP that can listen and action and make changes within this community. I'd love to make Wokingham, and I believe we'll make Wokingham into a technology hub and the Silicon Valley of the UK by bringing that internal investment from software companies, from development, to bring them into this centre. We've seen so much urban sprawl throughout this region in terms of where the Bracknell starts, where the Wokingham finishes. What do we have for the kids? What do they have? What do the next generation of children growing up to be young adults have here? What have the governments done for those children? Precious little. So let's look at the aspect that I love to do. Food banks. They have no place in any modern society. Yet, we see 249,000 visits to food banks in this area over a given year. That's not acceptable. We shouldn't have that environment. The aspect to get a GP appointment. We shouldn't have to be waiting weeks. I have to wait 6 weeks. Why? There's 2,500 GPs that are out of work. Who's responsible for that? If we bring that together in context of taking all the ideas from all these 4 parties, there's one of them that is good. So I would look at manifestos and say, let me touch on manifestos for a second. No one's going to deliver the manifestos, let's be honest, in terms of that. 1.6 million houses, 1.5 million houses to be built. With a propensity for both Labour and Conservative on having a bet recently, perhaps we should have a bet on how many of those are going to be deployed into Wokingham and what's there to support the infrastructure around that coming. Where's the schools? Where's the GPs? Where is that for the children, the education functionality they need to move forward? I don't hear that from any of the candidates. I don't hear that from the parties. I don't hear that locally from what we're putting in place for the next generation. So with that, I would like to propose our energy costs need to come lower. The cost of living is significantly high for everybody. Maybe not everybody in here, but these children coming through, their ability to get social housing, their ability to get on the ladder, we need to think of the future and those future generations. So electing me as an MP, I don't have a political background. I have an ability to get things done, and I have a propensity for Wokingham. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not going to stand up. Unfortunately, I broke my hip back in April, and I've had a hip replacement, so standing up is not on the cards this evening. Clearly, I'm not Clive. He is devastated that he's out of action. We're hoping he'll be back campaigning in a couple of days. He would have been here if he could, but he can't, so you have me instead. So I'm going to do my best to represent him and the Liberal Democrats, and I'm starting with what he was planning to say in his opening remarks. So Clive wants to be Wokingham's next MP because he wants to make a difference for Wokingham, because Wokingham matters to him. He's lived here for over 40 years. He went to Bulmarsh School in Woodley, and his daughters went to Embrook School. He has a track record of local action as a Woking Borough Councillor and then as leader of the council. And since he was selected as the Lib Dem parliamentary candidate, he has spoken to more than 10,000 residents. That's absolutely amazing. And those residents have told him what's important to them, what's important to you. And number one is fixing the NHS. Both Clive's children were born in the Royal Berks Hospital, the same hospital that found his cancer in 2008 and saved his life. He's been a governor of the hospital for 3 years and has campaigned to get it rebuilt. And it's one of the hospitals that Boris Johnson promised to rebuild in 2019, but they still don't know when it will happen. And it's not just the hospital that needs fixing. You can't get a GP appointment when you need it, or an NHS dentist. And this is where the government has taken us. The Lib Dems have a comprehensive, costed plan to fix the NHS. 8,000 extra GPs, reduce cancer waiting times, improve access to NHS dentists. And we have a plan to fix social care, because without fixing social care, you cannot fix the NHS. And then there's the cost of living crisis. The average mortgage in Wokingham has gone up by over £500 a month since Liz Truss's budget crashed the market. Energy bills have more than doubled and food bills are up over 30%. The Liberal Democrats will help those who are struggling. Look at the evidence, not just what we say in our manifesto about the cost of living, but the action we took locally when Clive was leader of the Borough Council. He made sure we ring-fenced a £250,000 fund to help families really struggling with the cost of living crisis, and that there would be free school meals in school holidays for children who had them in term time, even whether the government funded them or not. And then there's the environment. Climate change clearly matters, but also the sewage scandal. The government has allowed water companies to pump raw sewage into our rivers, the Loddon, the Thames and the Embrook. And a few weeks ago, the Embrook School had to close because of sewage polluted water in its grounds. We would end this sewage scandal. The Liberal Democrats would ban directors' bonuses until the sewage leaks stop and turn the companies into public interest companies, putting water quality and leaks ahead of shareholders' dividends. There is much more that is wrong. The country needs change, and Wokingham needs change. We deserve a better future and a fair deal. And as your MP, Clive can make this happen. Wokingham has been his home for 40 years. He cares deeply and will work tirelessly to stand up for everyone in this community, and he will fight to get a fair deal for Wokingham. Thank you.
Yes, when we had the handheld mic, you could hear then? You could hear, yes, that will. So.
Do we want this to be time?
Oh.
Sorry, can we just check if it was audible back?
Sorry, when you were saying when Lucy spoke, did you not hear her?
We couldn't hear Lucy at all.
Right, okay. I think she did check with you. She did check with you that you could hear her. She did check with you that you could hear her. So, yeah, okay. Okay. Could you, friends at the back, could you put your hands up if you didn't hear Lucy's speech, please? Okay, I'm very sorry, but she did check and she asked and people said they could, and I'm sorry that some of you haven't been able to hear that clearly. We're going to move on to the questions. We're going to move on to the questions now because much of the ground that we want to cover will be uncovered in that too. And there is also the recording, and if there's a problem with the recording, we will certainly do something about that. So thank you very much for your introductory remarks. The first question is from Philip Theobald, and it's a question about education. Where's Philip? Over there. Just wait till he gets the microphone. And are you ready, Monica, with the microphone? Because you're going to be first to answer. Thank you. So it's 2 minutes. They've got 2 minutes each now to answer this question. Philip, over to you.
Thank you. I'm a head teacher of a local primary school for the last 4 years and a teacher in Wokingham before that for 10 years before. Let's bring my question up here. So, could you please outline your specific plans and priorities for education in our local schools, including any proposed reforms and initiatives that you would champion if elected?
Thank you, Philip. Monica.
Thank you for your question. Education is very important. I know that parents work very hard to give their kids the best education and the best foundation to set them up for life. Labour is very clear on what needs to be done. Our schools are underfunded and they are underfunded, and we need to invest more into our schools. Labour is committed to provide 6,500 more teachers. We will provide access to free breakfast clubs for every primary school child. Now, I know that in Wokingham, schools do offer that, but every school child needs to have access because 1 in 5 kids are living in poverty. We will provide access to arts and music classes for every child, and more importantly, mental health support in all schools. And I think that is something that the Conservative government has failed to provide schools. And with the funding that has been cut for them, teachers are struggling. And I believe that is what Labour needs to do to help schools locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And Colin.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. It's not an easy answer for this. One thing that we would do, we would reverse Labour's policy of taxing private schools. The super rich, it's not going to affect them at all. They'll carry on going to Eton. But the parents who are scrimping and saving to send their children to make the best education, they have every right to have that in place. Now, back to your question more on a state aspect. We need to empower local schools. Politicians don't know how to increase the education in your schools. You do. And your counterparts do. We need to decentralise that community. We need to decentralise. We need to give you and empower you to create for Berkshire those local needs. If that's extra funding, that's what the government can provide. You come to them for that aspect, but it's about the education of the children. I want to counter breakfast clubs. It's not a school's responsibility to give breakfast clubs. It's a parent's responsibility. It's up to you as the teachers to empower and speak truth to power, to say we need to have this. We need to action these critical components in our region to make these children and make them attain the very best of their capabilities. They're not achieving that. We have some great individuals out there. We have some great teachers. We need to look at, Ofsted and never get to the situation before where a teacher commits suicide because of a failed report that comes out. So you need support emotionally and financially. Thank you.
I think we are very lucky and also unlucky here in Wokingham. We're very lucky because nearly all of our schools are either good or outstanding, and that is a tribute to the people that work in them. They're really inclusive, they try to look after everybody, and we have some of the best outcomes in the country for children with special educational needs, which is remarkable. But the gap is still large between their attainment and others, but the schools are doing absolutely everything they can to improve that. The reason we're unlucky is that we have the third lowest education funding in the country. And that is crippling our schools. I mean, they cannot afford, their budgets are so tight, they're in deficit. The special educational needs funding has got one of the largest proportionate deficits in the entire country. So I know, because I've discussed this with Clive, that his focus would be on lobbying to get a fairer funding formula. The government did announce there was a fairer funding formula. It hasn't turned out very fair for us. So we do need to do something particularly about the special educational needs funding across the country. It's a bigger issue than just Wokingham. The other thing that I think is really difficult in schools at the moment is children's mental health, particularly in secondary schools. I think COVID has taken an enormous toll on young people, and there are a number of other factors that are coming in to do with mobile phone use and cyberbullying and all those kinds of things that young people struggle with. And that's why the Lib Dems are pledging to have a mental health worker in every school, because that is one of the best ways to support our young people as they grow up. We want them to be happy and successful adults, and we really need to work at that.
Thank you.
Philip, thank you for your question and all that you and your colleagues do for our children in the community. My mum, as I said, was a teacher. I have huge respect for teachers' work. It's one of the most important jobs in our society, so I want to make sure that we compensate and provide the job satisfaction and the respect to teachers that's needed to recruit and retain and make sure that we continue to provide a really enriching learning environment for our children. Now, I'd also continue our great track record of Conservative reforms to education. We have done a huge amount of work since 2010 to lift standards in schools. Under Labour, we had only 68% of schools were good or outstanding. It's now 90%, over 90% in Wokingham. In Wokingham, our local team has also been fighting really hard for more funding here. The central government has given Wokingham Borough Council an additional £6 million for our schools and funded 2 new SEND schools, but we do need to go further. One of the strains in our local community around schooling, and I've heard this a lot from residents on the doorstep and in community groups, community action groups recently in Arborfield and Swallowfield, among others, is that Lib Dems are, at the council level, allowing for a lot of new development without local infrastructure, such as schools, keeping pace. And when you add that together with the threat of VAT on independent schools, there are so many hardworking families who won't be able to afford the school fee increase. They've told me on the doorstep that they're inquiring with state schools about moving their children, and there just aren't the spaces. We need to hold the Lib Dem Council to account and developers to account to deliver that required capacity to keep pace with the growth of the area and also to absorb the very horrific costs strains that I expect will come of the left-wing policies on VAT. Finally, as for reforms, because you asked about tangible reforms, I tried to bring us a more sustainable answer.
I'm afraid, Lucy, your time is out.
All right.
So, thank you. Thank you. We're just going to come on to question 2, which is going to be started with Colin. So, but just before we do that, could Nicholas Welsh, who asked a question, where are you? Right, okay, we just need to talk to you about that. Anyway, that's question 3. Question 2 is from Adam Phelps. Where's Adam Phelps? Bless you, good. Thank you.
Okay, so question: how do you plan to balance the need to build affordable housing with the need to manage infrastructure and protect green space?
Thank you. Colin. Sorry, did you not hear the question? The question. Okay, I can read it again. How do you plan to balance the need to build affordable housing with the need to manage infrastructure and protect green space? And Colin is going to answer that one first.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much for the question. Affordable housing is one of the most difficult parts that we face for the next generation. The price of houses has gone significantly up. You need a massive income and a massive savings to be able to get on the housing ladder. So we need to look at this differently. We need to step back and look at, I believe in Wokingham we have in the area, there's 30,000 houses that aren't occupied. Not for 1 minute suggesting we requisite those and put them into place. But when developers are building development sites in these areas, what are they putting in place? They're looking to maximize their profit. You know, they need to be held to account to put affordable housing front and center of that, and to a high standard. Let me be honest, I have a friend of mine who's the CEO of a housing company, and his son races with my son. And he tells me, we're not interested in affordable housing. We need to make as much profit from that as possible. That's not acceptable in a 20... So this guy's sitting just putting fists at me.
Okay, sorry.
This gentleman here.
Right, no, we're not entering into this. Thank you. Sorry, Colin.
So, you know, the affordable housing has to come to fore. Look at all the buildings, look at all the business buildings. They need to be converted. You know, if they're not having individuals, they're not having businesses in there, what's to stop those being converted into flats? Planning has to be fixed. But coming back to your point on the green belt, there's a lot of low-scale, low-grade agricultural land around that what goes into place? Solar panels. Now, if it's being used for solar panels, why cannot that be used as a grey field site? So we need to do more. Everybody needs to do more. You need to get on the housing ladder, and it's difficult. So the housing developers need to be held to account. So affordable housing is front and centre before planning is given for them to build the bigger houses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think it's probably one that's at the forefront of most people's minds in Wokingham, because we've had 20 years of development with the infrastructure lagging behind. Lib Dems have only been in charge for 2 years. We're trying to do something about it. We brought on the infrastructure in Arbfield, the village centre. The application's just been approved. Sainsbury's has signed up for the supermarket. But it's really difficult. And this is a general election. It's not a local election. And so I think the bigger picture is what's important. The bigger picture is the way that development in this country is developer-led, and they build the type of houses that they make a profit from. And until we turn around to have a system where local people and local councils have more say in what goes into their area, we are never going to fix this problem. I know Colin has talked about people buying houses. Many people in this area, it's not just buying houses, they can't afford to rent a house. And it's just, we're completely in the wrong place on housing. No government has managed to fix it since the war. They haven't built enough houses. We have to balance that with keeping our green spaces, because after all, that's why we like to live in Wokingham. It's a beautiful area. We don't want to see it completely concreted over. But we do have to find a way to provide more affordable housing for our young people. And that's why the Lib Dems have got a target, and I think we're the only party to do that, of 150,000 affordable homes to be built every year. And that means truly affordable homes, not lower cost market housing. We can't have people homeless. We're one of the richest economies in the world, and it's a disgrace that we have young people who cannot afford to live or buy or rent a house. It's terrible.
Adam, thanks so much for your question. It's one of the top 3 campaign priorities for us, and Lib Dems have been quiet on it conveniently in all of their literature and the opening remarks, because they've changed their position on this issue after winning votes in the local elections. They're conveniently delaying updating the local plan or publication of it until after the general election to avoid scrutiny. Listen, I think it's a difficult balance, right? But we need to protect our countryside, and there are ways to do that while also increasing the affordability of housing. So one thing is that the Conservatives have built 2.5 million more homes since 2010, and we've also recently made it much easier and cheaper and faster to develop on brownfield sites, which is important so that we protect our countryside and also build the new homes. Locally, for instance, we know that the Lib Dem Council has a lot of properties that it owns in town, which it could be using to, 1, generate revenue for the taxpayer instead of hiking taxes, but 2, to create new homes instead of building outwards. I'd also say that one of the most important enablers of getting people on the housing ladder is, of course, the cost of mortgage, right? And that's why our Prime Minister has been working incredibly hard, and the team around him, to bring inflation back to normal. It's now much lower than our peers in Western Europe and in the US. We're already starting to see mortgage costs come down. And that's important, but we've got to keep going in that right direction. And I worry that a left-wing government would put that growth and that financial security at risk. Finally, the local Conservative team worked really hard to remove top-down housing targets from the centre. We lobbied really hard at central government level to achieve that and to cut the local housing numbers for Wokingham in half. It's a real shame that the Lib Dems haven't taken advantage of that to update our local plan, and as a result, we're seeing a risk of speculative development on our countryside unnecessarily. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam, for your question. I know a lot of people have that on their mind, and it's a very important question. For us, we know that there is a housing crisis. We need to build more affordable homes. We need to build good quality homes and have the right infrastructure to go with this growing community. With that said, Wokingham is a fantastic town that people choose to live in and raise a family. So you will have people that want to move here and be here. Now, Labour is committed to build 1.5 million affordable homes and give people an opportunity to get on the housing ladder. By changing planning law, this helps by building on grey belt. So developers can build on grey belt and have the right infrastructure, meaning help with the NHS, which is part of our manifesto, so GP surgeries won't be as stretched out, schools will have more placements in schools, and our road maintenance will also be part of that. So I think that is important for us to look at and cover the housing crisis that we have, and I think it's something that's been fully costed, unlike the other parties that are coming up with these numbers and they haven't been able to match in 14 years. So, thank you.
Thank you. Question number 3 is Nicholas Welsh. Thank you. The microphone's just coming, and the first one to answer that will be Prue. Right, the microphone's there. Thank you.
Hello, Nicholas Welsh. What skills and experiences do you have that would make you an excellent constituents MP for Wokingham?
That's an interesting one. I know we said no discussion. I just want to make it plain that the rules on how housing numbers for the local plan are calculated have not changed, and there has been no reduction in the number that we have been forced to have. And I would like to make that plain. Right, so answering the question, obviously I'm not Clive. Clive has a business background, and he also has a background in the council, and he's lived here for 40 years. So he knows Wokingham very well. He knows quite a lot about how things work here. He knows about how the council functions. He can work with the council, which is an important partner for an MP to have. And I can say as a councillor myself that Theresa May, for example, while she was the MP, she was very helpful to the council, even though as Liberal Democrats we were not in the same party as her. That was not true for another of the MPs who is perhaps a bit more local and who somehow never found the time to come and meet us, which was a very great pity. But he has a deep, caring knowledge of this area. And I think that is something that you can't underestimate. So if you say something to Clive about somewhere in the borough, he knows where that is and why it matters and what the history of that is. And therefore, he can talk to people and understand what they're saying to him. One of his biggest concerns is about what's happening to the town centre. It's very difficult to fight against changing high streets with the internet and so on, but he is pretty determined that if he gets elected, he will go and join the, or all-party parliamentary groups which are to do with local businesses and high streets, and try to do what he can to help our town centres.
Thank you.
Nicholas, thank you. Listen, I think achievement and track record of delivery and getting things done really matters. You know, I've proven that in my business career. I have a standout business career. I've worked as the youngest managing director in the last couple of firms I've worked at. That took a lot of graft, a lot of 100-hour weeks. I work with startups to help them grow their businesses. I know the hustle that it takes to survive and thrive in this economy, and that's going to be really important as we look to accelerate our economic growth in the years ahead. But that achievement required a strategic ability, analytical ability to really take ownership of difficult issues and get things done. Too often we're seeing at the local council people passing the buck on responsibility and not really gripping the issues to drive outcomes for residents. That's what matters to me. We hear a lot about the Lib Dem candidate hanging his hat on being local. He doesn't actually live in the constituency. We heard about how great he doesn't actually live in the constituency. We've heard about how great Theresa May was as a constituency MP. She didn't live there to start with. She became an excellent local constituency MP. That is exactly what I plan to do. I plan to be an incredibly active and present member of this community. I think finally also is track record in government. So I have, in a voluntary capacity, advised government to really deliver policy recommendations that were delivered in the government. And that was around supporting our innovation economy and liberalising innovation and growth. And that's what really makes a difference to people's take-home pay at the end of the day. Thank you.
I've worked as a constituency caseworker for 16 years, over 16 years. I started this when I was 19 as a volunteer, and I don't have any political background. I got into it because I was interested in helping the community. And 16 years on, I stayed, and I'm still there helping the community. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I care about. I've seen firsthand the difference an MP's office can make to someone's life. When they are in desperate need for help, they will go to that MP. And I've seen plenty of MPs say, oh, housing matter? I don't care about this. It's the local council. It's got nothing to do with me. You can't pay your bills? That's not my problem. I can't do anything about this. But MPs can make a difference if they are active and they care about the community and puts the community at the start and at the heart of everything that they do. That is why I think that gives me the experience I need to be a fantastic MP for Wokingham and represent the community. Thank you.
Nicholas, thank you for your question. Very tough one. I've set up multiple organisations in terms of software, built those up from a startup. But let me put that to one side. This isn't about me. It isn't about any of us up here. You know, anybody who's going to be an MP here is for the first time. So that's a learning curve. You know, and it's not about us. We're there to listen. And that's why we're all sitting up here with two ears. We need to listen to what you need and what we need to champion. Not what we think is best, and we're going to go off on a tangent. So it's about tenacity, it's about listening to you as constituents and taking that forward to drive with tenacity to make those key points to make Wokingham a better place moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Question 4 has been written by Cindy Gray. Yes, thank you. And Lucy will answer it first.
What can each candidate do to make the biggest environmental challenge facing Wokingham? And what is their plan to tackle it? So what is the biggest challenge you see in terms of the environment in this constituency and nationally? And what can you as a candidate do about it?
Thank you. Lucy first.
Thanks so much, Cindy. I grew up in a nature reserve. I care very deeply about the environment. I volunteered on local AO&B conservation projects as well, so it's an issue that's dear to my heart. I think access to the great outdoors is hugely enriching to our children in particular. I want my boys and all of the children in our community to have that same access to the great outdoors, and it's also about environmental protection and floodplain protection. And I think the greatest threat to that locally is, of course, this unnecessary overdevelopment, because we haven't updated the local plan as we could, and that's really hurting the local environment. Now, I totally hear that there's a lot of debate locally also on water pollution, so I just want to lay out some truths on water pollution too, because under Labour there was almost no monitoring of water quality. It was 7%. We brought that up to 100%. It's through that data that we can hold water execs to account. I used to work with utilities for a living. I know how to hold water execs to account. We've increased sanctions as Conservatives on the water companies. We're investing those sanctions back into water infrastructure improvements. We've banned bonuses for execs of water companies that are found to have criminally breached their commitments to the community. And we're, as a result of that and other funding measures that our Conservative government have introduced, seeing over $2 billion a year now being invested to avoid unnecessary discharge into our rivers. The Lib Dem water plan, they're calling for a ban on storm overflows. That would mean that water is backed up into people's homes, which obviously risks health and safety. Now, I'm very keen to keep tackling that issue on behalf of the community, but I just want to put some of those records straight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy, for your question. I believe environment and climate change is the single greatest long-term threat facing our country and Wokingham. But we are facing the impact already. That's why Labour is committed to deliver net zero by 2030, delivering clean energy and lowering bills to help with cost of living. We will return Britain to being an international leader on combating climate change, offering strong global leadership and technical skills. Unlike the Conservatives, we believe climate change is a threat, but we also believe that economic growth is possible with investment in green technology, and high-quality jobs will stem from manufacturing the tools to decarbonize our economy. Now, Lucy, you did touch up on sewage in our waters, so I'm just going to respond to that as well. It's absolutely disgusting what water companies are doing, putting public health and safety at risk for their own profit. For far too long, Conservatives have turned a blind eye on this and allowed water companies to get away with it. Labour will put failing water companies under special measures to clean up our water. We will give regulators new powers to take more forceful actions and criminal charges for persistent lawbreakers. Someone has to step up and clean our waters, and Labour will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, for your question. There's no easy answer to this. The gentleman earlier needs affordable housing. We need to build, and we need to put those into places. We need to be mindful of where they're going to go to reduce that impact onto the environment. We need to bring technology into this space. You know, how many of you knew if you created a new road now, you can generate electricity from that road and then goes back into charging the network? No one's deploying that. Why not? So the technology is there. I had a proposal to Wokingham Council about 5 years ago to build an educational facility down at Forest Road. And it was a motorsport-based facility that was completely net zero. And the R&D that would come from that was based purely around environmental change, of green energy, of green transport, although those initiatives. You can have an app to turn up to say, how do I get to this location the most green and efficient way? Or how do I get there the fastest? Unfortunately, we're really going to have to adopt technology a lot better to make that happen. Let me talk on the sewage aspect as well, as my two colleagues have brought this up. Listen, the system is archaic. It's been there since the Victorian age. We have had sewage leakage for 4 decades. And in fairness to Conservatives, they're now able to monitor that 100%. But criminalising a CEO of a water company, Who's going to come and do that job? You will not get anybody capable of making those change. So we need perhaps look at a carrot, not a stick, to drive that sewage issue. I swim in outdoor lakes locally, and they're clean, but the rivers are and have been always like this situation. Just now we're able to monitor that a lot better, and that needs to be part of every environmental capability we have. But back to the original question, we need to bring technology into this space quickly. Thank you.
So, I think all of you will have received multiple Liberal Democrat leaflets through your doors, telling you, and probably until you're quite sick of the sight of them, which shows you how keen we are to fight this election. Many of them deal with what we want to do about sewage. It's an absolute shocker, and as I said in the opening statement, we would ban directors' bonuses until the sewage leak stops and turn the companies into public interest companies. But I would rather talk about the bigger issue, which is not Wokingham specific, but matters to Wokingham, and that is climate change. We have to tackle it. It's the biggest threat to all of our ways of life in this country and across the world. And if we don't deal with it, everything will become unrecognisable within a very short space of time. There are things we can do. It's very sad that the Conservative government has backed away from them. We would do as Labour would do and put the targets back for 2030. And we think that there's an awful lot we could do for our own economy if we could just green it, get the green jobs, get the renewable energy jobs, and all those kind of things going. So, and a local example of that is the solar farm that the council is putting into Barkham, which will not only provide renewable energy, but also will provide an income stream for the council to prop up our local services, which are badly in need of propping up, I have to say. I don't think I need to go on longer. I've got 30 seconds to go, but I don't think I need it. We need to tackle climate change, and we need to take it seriously.
Question 5 is from Dr. Susanna Denny. Dr. Susanna Denny? At the back, right, wait, the microphone will come to you. Quickly. That's good, thank you. And Monica's going to answer first.
As a GP in Berkshire for more than 25 years, I've seen general practice change out of all proportion. And I really share the frustration of patients unable to get a GP appointment. Additional funding's been ring-fenced, so cannot be used to fund nurses and GPs. Alongside this, GPs are leaving or retiring early, and we're also seeing salaried GPs being made redundant, and we now have unemployed GPs in this country. I would really like to know what the next government is going to do to adequately fund general practice so that we can provide the fantastic service that we want to as GPs and that our patients deserve.
Thank you. Monica first.
Thank you for your question. I agree that NHS is at a breaking point. The NHS waiting list right now is longer than when Rishi Sunak took over. Labour has committed in providing 40,000 extra appointments a week on weekends and evenings. This will all be paid for by closing the loopholes in Rishi Sunak's non-dom plan and cracking down on tax dodgers. It's all funded for, and we know the investment that we need to put into our NHS. Our doctors and nurses deserve to be treated better, and they need to be paid properly. So Labour will step in and fix the NHS for everybody. Thank you.
Hi, Susanna. Both my parents worked as nurses for 40 years each in the NHS. Let me put it into context. We're spending 190 billion a year, 12% of GDP on the NHS, and it's not working. It needs change. But I look at, we need to be radical. Politicians aren't going to fix this. You know, it is a 5 and 10 year get well strategy, and it needs to be removed from politicians to fix that. Politicians are interested in a 5-year term. They're not good enough at coming to NHS and fixing that. You are. You know what needs to be put into place. So we need to put experts in there. I worked on so many software projects inside the NHS, and the wastage is simply staggering. That money was not getting through to the front line. Absolutely staggering. PPE, the cost of that. This week, 1.4 billion of PPE was destroyed. Who's paying for that? Every single one of you. The money is there, it's not used properly. And I'd argue this needs a cross-party of all parties to get involved in this and bring the experts in to make a change to the NHS, so it can be something that we can get back to being fundamentally proud of moving forward. Carrying on as it is, putting money into it, is not working, and it will not work. And anybody can say we can bring 40,000 extra appointments. How? I spent 8-9 hours in A&E last week. My father was in Royal Berks the other day. They're in there for 24 hours, 40 hours in A&E. It's not acceptable. The money is there, it needs to be used differently, and remove it from politicians and bring people in who can develop a 5 and 10 year plan to make the NHS work. It will not be fixed in 2 years. It will not be fixed arguably in the Parliament of Labour coming into power. It's not possible. But with change and looking at it differently, we can be, again, have an NHS that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
So I would say that unless you're actually a GP or a close relative or friend of a GP, you probably don't understand the very convoluted way that GPs are funded and how the system works. It's absolutely extraordinary because GPs are part of the NHS and yet they're also private businesses, and the hoops they have to jump through, the ring fencing, as the questioner said, is absolutely ridiculous. We have these strange organisations now called integrated care boards, and we're in one with other councils in the West of Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire. The funding is all over the place. Different areas don't get the right amount of money, and GPs are then hamstrung on what they can spend the money on. And we can't go on like this as a country. I think actually I'm going to agree with my colleague on the right, literally and figuratively, and say that this is a longer than a 5-year thing. We need to fix social care as well as the NHS, and that's why we're proposing cross-party work on it, because it's never going to get sorted out if we use it as a political football. So it's going to be a long haul. It's a very difficult way to come back. But one of the first things to do, as with dentistry, is to sort out the contracts that GPs have in NHS. And because we'll never get GPs back into the system, no wonder they're leaving in droves, and recruiting them is really difficult because it's an awful job at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Denny, thank you so much for the work that you do in the community and the important question. The NHS, and particularly primary care, is an area actually that I'd like to see more bold action, more strategic reform. Now, you know, like many families in the room, I share the anxieties when my children get sick in winter, the GPs are overrun and A&E is totally inaccessible. The Conservatives have actually given record funding to the NHS, so it does need some structural reform. Now, our Prime Minister has started that to an extent, right? He's introduced the first ever long-term workforce plan, which is doubling the number of training spaces for doctors and nurses. We've also recently outlined a plan to modernise or build 250 GP surgeries, and also on the structural side, you know, drawing on his own family's experience, our Prime Minister has introduced this new pharmacy-first approach, which is relieving some of the pressure on GPs and actually freeing up 20 million new GP appointments a year. Labour's new appointments don't touch the sides in the context of that kind of reform. Now, I do think that we need more of a shake-up, though, because, you know, for instance, There are systems, for instance, in Australia, whereby effectively the tax for people on health ratchets up with income. So at a certain point, you're incentivized to get private insurance. And as a result of that, they've also got a richer private insurance market that also strengthens the health sector as a whole, including on the public side. We need to be looking at innovative solutions like that. And I'd be very happy to take it up cross-party.
Question is from David S. and is about food banks. David S.
In 23-24, 3.1 million food parcels were delivered by the Trussell Trust to 1.7 million people. In Wokingham alone, over 5,000 food parcels were distributed, of which over 2,000 were for children. What are the candidates' plans to ensure families and children have enough to eat without resorting to food banks?
Thank you, David. Listen, in Wokingham, it's not just the food banks. In Wokingham, we had over a year 250,000 visits to food banks. It's not acceptable. We're in an affluent area. We need to do more to drive that down. Well, why are people driving and going to the food banks? It's a cost of living crisis. We didn't see so many food banks 10 years ago. But this isn't just a UK problem. This is Germany, this is France, this is the Netherlands. But we need to fix it on a local level. We need to drive that aspect of what can we do to bring that costs down on a local level. It's tough to bring it down. For instance, energy costs here are 5 times more than in the US. US has less food banks per population than we do here. So we need to bring business into this. We need to aspect that. We're not going to get rid of food banks in this next parliament or across the community. What I'd like to see in Wokingham is by the end of that 5-year term, whichever MP is here, the food bank is gone. And there's no need for that. But we need to be responsible. We need to look at the whole aspect behind that to be able to drive that. The universal credit, the aspect, the cost of living, every component in there contributes to a food bank. And being honest, I don't think anybody up here is going to be able to give you that perfect answer to say, how do we get rid of food banks? We have to tackle that with a cost of living. And that does not happen in a year. That's going to have to be driven by a government, by communities, to put that into place with the churches and the Trussell community to make that happen in there. So, unfortunately, I don't have the 100% answer for you to how we remove those food banks. We need to look at that in the period of the Parliament and say, that is a target. That's a success criteria that we should be judged on in this community, that food banks are gone and homelessness is gone. There's over 30,000 people in the Wokingham area from shelter that are homeless. That's not acceptable. So we need to tackle that again, cross-party, with everybody involved to make that a thing of the past.
Thank you. I'm not going to embarrass her by pointing at her, but I can see in the audience the lady who runs the Wokingham Food Bank, and I would like to thank her on your behalf for all this work that she does. It is truly shocking. It is a disgrace that we have people have to rely on food banks, not just a small number of people either, increasing numbers of people. As cost of living crisis bites harder, more and more people are having to turn to them. They just cannot make ends meet. And although inflation may be down, of course, we've already had the high inflation. So it's low inflation on top of other inflation. It doesn't mean prices have gone down. They're just going up more slowly. And part of the reason for this is that our benefits system is not fit for purpose. There are many, many people as well who are in work, but who still have to claim benefits because their work does not pay them enough. And we need to fix that. As well. I'm not going to say I absolutely know what's word for word in the Lib Dem manifesto, but I know we have got something about reform of universal credit so that it pays people enough to live on. And I know that there was a big upsurge in use of food banks after the extra money that was put on universal credit during COVID was taken away because people simply could not manage on the amount that they're given. It's wrong. It will take a long time to fix. But we can't have an economy which essentially pays people so little that even when they're working, they cannot afford to live. That is what we need to address.
David, thank you. I don't want anyone in our community to have to resort to food banks. It was one of my first visits when I was selected as a candidate to go to Wokingham Charity and Community Hub, and I spoke with a lot of the charities there. One of the things that came out of that was actually, in every conversation, the importance of early intervention, trying to help these people sooner so that they don't spiral in the first place, but also to spare more costly interventions later on, so we've got more resources to continue investing in the community. I personally volunteered for years with Citizens Advice, so I understand some of the concerns around what leads to this, but I think a lot of it, of course, has to do with the strength of our economy. And so actually, as Conservatives, I would point out, since 2010, we've lifted over 1 million people out of poverty. Since 2010, and in recent years, through our cost of living support, we've prevented a further 1.3 million from falling into poverty. Now we've got also record employment rate at 74%, which is 4% higher than under Labour. The Conservatives introduced the national living wage to end low pay, and we've increased that every year, including last year an increase of 10%, which we think is meaningful. Now, that's not sufficient. There's a lot more work to do, and what I'd like to do is, in part, review how we look at levelling up, because clearly there are otherwise relatively affluent areas like Wokingham with pockets of deprivation, and we need to draw that to people's attention and make sure that we get more funding for those pockets of deprivation in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. It's shocking that families have to turn to food banks to feed their families. It's 2024 and we have to use food banks. In my line of work, I have seen the difference between a Labour government and 14 years of Conservatives when family come to ask for help. Labour has a plan, and by introducing Great British Energy, this will help bring energy bills down, keep inflation down, and a stable economy. It's shameful the Conservatives allowed this to get to this point, but Labour is the change people need in Wokingham, and we will fix the cost of living crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I must say thank you to our candidates for keeping to time. We're doing well, cracking through the questions. This is number 7, and number 7 is from Mark Passenger. Oh, you're there, right, okay.
How do we solve the crisis of social care?
Thank you, and first to answer that.
This is obviously front and centre of the Lib Dem campaign. I hope you've all seen Ed Davies' party political broadcast talking about how he cares for his son John, who couldn't speak until he was about 9, and then said the word daddy, which I think Ed cried in the middle of the thing. This is a really important issue for so many people in our community, and we have seen that the minute somebody puts their head above the parapet and tries to suggest a solution, they get shot down. We can't go on with this. I think I said earlier, it's a party political football. We're never going to solve it. And that's why in our manifesto, we think we should have an all-party commission to look at it and look at it seriously. I mentioned Theresa May earlier. When she tried to do something about it in 2017, she got completely slaughtered. And that isn't the right way to behave. It is a crisis. So many families are clinging on, people doing care for a pitiful carer's allowance, when without them, the whole system would fall over. So many families reliant on parents and children to look after the parents, and just terrible. So the only way to do this is to get it out of the political arena and to come up with a sensible solution. I don't know whether you know that the council is spending £65 million a year on adult social care out of our budget. Adults and children's social care is 2/3 of what the council spends. And councils up and down the country are about to fall over because of this commitment. So unless we address it as a country and try to do it in a sensible, grown-up manner, the whole system, I'm really frightened, will start to fall over. And then where will we be?
Thank you.
Thank you. It is really one of the most difficult problems for the next generation of politicians to solve, I think, care. And it does need some systemic, structural change. You know, we started this past year, our Conservative government recognised the scale of the problem. There is a huge increase in demand for care, and as a result, we increased council budgets by 4.5 billion this year, of which was 1.5 billion for adult social care. Now, it's a start, it's not sufficient. I think we need to be rewarding or finding a way to recognise monetarily the work of care workers in the home who don't do it professionally. I spoke, you know, I spent quite a lot of time speaking with CLASP and Promise Inclusion, who are experts on the front line in this space in our voluntary sector. They do great work. I want to be able to spend more time with them, understand exactly what the problems are. But I think, you know, one of the things we could look at, for instance, is bringing it back to a national level, because there isn't an even distribution of social care demand. It's particularly high here in Wokingham, and we need to look at a more systemic national solution. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I have to agree with everybody on the panel that social care is so important, and it's not one easy, simple answer to fix it. My father had a stroke when I was 3, and the support we have received by the NHS and our local authority have been fantastic, and I see the difference that adult social care can make to someone's life. I do think that central government funding to local authorities is important in that, and how the council distributes that. Tough decisions do need to be made because there isn't enough funding, and funding needs to be put in the right places. But I would bring that, you know, it's the council that has to make that decision with the funding that they have available. And Labour is committed in long-term funding plans for local authorities. Thank you.
Mark, thank you for your question. I think we perhaps need to look at it in a different way. We need to look in 5 years, what do we want from social care? What does good look like? Because at the moment we don't have good. We've got a terrible social care system. We've had 14 years of a Tory government, Labour before, and then nothing has got better. So in 5 years' time, when the Parliament finishes, what does good look like? And then we work backwards. And we need to put it back into central government, because all the regions have the same. It's not just Wokingham with the problem, it's Bracknell, it's Maidenhead, it's the entirety of the UK. So let's bring it into a point where we can fix it from a central point and then push that back. And look at the milestones. Let's look at the milestones at year 1. Have we hit that milestone? No. Okay, what do we need to do to put into place? And we need to fix that as a key priority as part of NHS changes and what we need to move forward. You know, social care, they're not paid enough. These guys, they do an amazing job out there, but it's an ever-growing population, it's an ever-aging population, and if we leave it as it is, it's just going to break even more. So my view is we need to look 5 years out, 10 years out, and look at how that can be the best in the world. And honestly, we need to plagiarise. You know, we don't know everything as the UK. We need to look at other countries and see what do they do. Let's not start everything from scratch. Let's look at who does well in Germany or France, and let's take the best of their systems and then put our social care at the very top pinnacle of everybody globally. Thank you.
Our 8th question is from Lucy Bowley. You here? Right. There's a mic coming down to you. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you consider to be the benefits and/or disadvantages of our current levels of immigration, and what, if anything, would you change?
Thank you. And that's Lucy to answer first.
Lucy, thank you. I grew up in quite a multicultural society. I understand the benefits of migration when it works well and when it's managed at sustainable levels. Immigrations are far too high at the moment. We simply don't have sufficient homes, school places, and capacity in our GPs and our hospitals to accommodate the existing growth in our area, let alone hundreds of thousands of migrants a year. So it is important that our government is taking action. We need to be able to control our borders. We need to be able to introduce caps, which our government has now announced this year, caps on visas. Also new measures where there's been a massive uptick in visa applications over the past few years, for instance, around student families. That's going to make a big difference, and we're seeing immigration, legal immigration, coming down very significantly. Illegal immigration is a smaller portion of the numbers, much smaller, but still something that we need to tackle, which is what our government's doing. What I'd like to focus on around that is increased enforcement around criminal law enforcement around the trafficking gangs, prioritizing our resources there, and on patrolling the border with France, on cracking down on supply chains around the illegal boats, and on the funding flows for them. In addition to that, the black market in the UK is a bit more pervasive than in France, for instance, so people are able to work here, and it's one of the things that's attracting them to our area. We're starting to crack down on that around the black market in employment and in banking. We need to do more of that, but I'm confident we're on the right track, and I'm determined to accelerate that work.
Thank you for your question. Immigration is part of the community we live in. I've worked with many asylum seekers who have come to the UK, fleeing persecution in their home country and making a new home here. The Conservatives have spent hundreds of millions of pounds on this wasted, actually, on Rwanda scheme, which is more of a scam than a scheme. That money could have been spent here on Home Office, the system that we have, to fix the backlog. Labour has a plan. What we will do is we need to target the criminal gangs that are using these vulnerable individuals who are fleeing their country to take advantage of them for their own good. They will bring these people here. Sorry, that gentleman needs to stop. He's very distracting.
Yes. Can you please just not gesture, please? That'd be helpful. Thank you. Carry on, please, Monica. I hope you stop the timer for a minute.
Sorry. I'm not sure. We need to work with the system that we have, invest the money here instead of wasting it elsewhere, and bring the backlog down. And it's not right to allow people what you want to do, what your government wants to do, to say that you can come into the UK, just you, work, and not your family. You can't split families up. It's not right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucy, thank you for your question. Listen, since 2010, UK's population has grown by 10 million. That's 4 towns the size of Manchester. Where's the infrastructure? And that isn't, we're on a decline in population. But if we look at the situation, we are targeting to give Rwanda 490 million. We're giving France 500 million. That's £1 billion that could be used in a better way, because those systems are not working. You know, we need to look at targeted immigration. People that are going to come into the NHS, bring value into the NHS. We can't have unvetted, unfettered people that we have no knowledge who they are, from 18 to 25-year-olds coming in and disappear into the environment. So we need to look at a different way. We do not put in place extra police stations, extra facilities, extra reservoirs. The last reservoir built in the UK was 1992. So a population growth of 10 million to bring that in is ridiculous. We should not see anybody putting their lives at risk trying to cross the channel, coming into the UK. We need to work with different environments to bring those in. We need to take perhaps that 1 billion that we've squandered as a country because it's not doing anything and put it into asylum seekers in safe spaces and a safe route into the UK. So any embassy that we have around the world, they need to be the forefront of bringing asylum seekers into the UK. And what value do they add? Instead of paying £5,000 euros, 20,000, to these traffickers who don't care. They're just happy, put them on a boat and send them across the UK. I have a friend who lives in Dover. He walks his dog along Dover every day along the coast. There's over 1,000 coming in every day. They come in, minibuses turn up, and they disappear into the ether. That cannot continue. It's not 300, it's 1,000 plus per day. So we need to address this quickly.
Thank you very much.
So, where to start with this? I'll start with the B word, Brexit. Many people thought that Brexit would stop immigration. That was one of the reasons why people voted for it. It has reduced dramatically the number of people who come here from the EU, but the number of people who come here who don't come from the EU has absolutely rocketed. And although all the focus, and I will come on to this, is about the people in the boats, that's a tiny, tiny proportion of immigration, and we need to bear that in mind. And there are some really difficult things that we are doing where we are cutting off our own noses to spite our faces. So, universities, for example, one of the ways that the government is trying to crack down on immigration is to reduce the number of foreign students. And yet our universities rely on the income from those foreign students to exist. And how are they going to manage? Besides which, those foreign students often stay on in this country and contribute to our economy. It's really a stupid way to carry on. The unjust stuff for UK citizens who fall in love with somebody abroad can't bring their family to this country because the government has decided they now have to earn, I think it's £34,000 a year before they can bring their family members. That is just wrong. So many jobs, people do not earn that sort of money, and yet they are able to manage in this country. How cruel do we want to be as a nation? And that brings me on to the cruelest thing of all, and that is that we have no safe and legal routes for asylum seekers. We have to fix that as a country. We cannot carry on like this. That's why we get the small boats. There's no other means for them to get here. People are desperate. They don't put their children in boats and try and cross the channel if they're not desperate. And we are not going to stop it by being draconian. We have to stop people smugglers, but we have to look at ourselves and say, are we doing this right? And I really don't think we are. They're human beings.
Thank you. And this is now our final question. You'll hopefully be pleased to hear because it's warm in here. Thank you for your perseverance. And the final question goes to John Cobb. Where's John Cobb? Thank you. A microphone will come to you. This side. Thank you.
I'd like to ask the candidates what they think the most important priority for the next government will be, whether it's their party or not. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Monica first. What do you think is the biggest challenge or priority that will face the next government?
Thank you for your question. Obviously, we are going to come in after 14 years of conservative chaos and mismanagement of our finances. Labour has been clear with all the plans that they have and the priorities that they have. Everything has been fully costed and funded for in our manifesto, and we are not making promises that we cannot keep and there is no money for. I know that in Wokingham, many residents are concerned about NHS, antisocial behaviour, cost of living crisis, and similar issues to that. And this is Labour's top priority to address as well. So I'm confident that if Labour wins the next general election on the 4th of July, you will see positive changes that the previous government failed to deliver for our citizens. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Listen, whoever comes in next has got one tough 5 years to get to rectify where we are. I'd put it into probably 4 key areas. The NHS. You know, it's been ignored for too long, and a politician's view is let's just give it more money. And it doesn't work. We need to look seriously about what we want from the NHS in the future. So that covers social care, that covers doctors, that covers GPs. That to me is our key priority that we need to focus on. Cost of living, yeah, absolutely, we need to look at that. The energy crisis has come. You know, a lot of these guys, when Ukraine was invaded, the prices went up. Our wholesale costs have come down to pre-Ukraine invasion times. How many of our costs have come down on that energy? None. So no one begrudges any of the companies making a profit, but it needs to be consequential in terms of what we're putting into place. Economic growth. That needs to be first and foremost as well as one of the key aspects of us driving forward, because without economic growth, we can't fund these key aspects of NHS investment and ratification in there. And we need to keep tax low. So we need to fund that. We need to look at different aspects. Economic growth goes hand in hand with tax. And they're all interlinked in how we're going to fund and drive the NHS to be a successful, proud aspect that we look forward to using moving forward. So, thank you.
So there are lots of possible answers to this. You could say climate change, economic stability, NHS. But for me, there's one thing, and I'm sure for Clive too, that matters more, and that is to be honest, to have integrity, to adhere to those Nolan principles that Lynn mentioned at the beginning. If we can't trust our government, where are we? If you have a Prime Minister that lies to us, he lies to Parliament, we're lost as a democracy. We cannot carry on like that. We have to have a government that we can trust. We have to have a government that tells us the truth, that isn't in there to enrich their mates and all the other things that have been going on. We've had enough, and we need the next government to tell us the truth, even if it's unpalatable and we don't want to hear it. In the long run, that is the only way to save ourselves. The truth will always come out, and trying to hide it never gets you anywhere. It's always the cover-up that gets you. So that, I think, is the biggest priority. That's what everybody is desperate for, is a government that is honest with the population.
John, thank you. Number one priority, I think, is to continue to accelerate economic growth so everyone in our country and in our communities can feel better off and make a good living for them and their families. And that's actually going to be a really delicate thing to preserve. Since 2010, as Conservatives, we've grown the economy by 24%. That far outstrips all of our Western peers. We've been through a lot of shocks with COVID and the war in Ukraine. We've now brought inflation back under control. We're now growing our economy well again. That's a really delicate thing to preserve, and I'm concerned deeply that a left-wing government propped up by Lib Dems will turn us backwards on that, and it will hit hard-working people here. Now, climate arguably is the biggest existential priority. And actually on that, we have a proud record. Back in 2010, only 7% of our power came from renewables. It's now 50%. We are the first major economy to cut our emissions in half, and we've done that without unduly overburdening people with their bills. We've got, I think, the top 5 biggest offshore wind energy farms are all in the UK. And every single nuclear power generator was initiated by a Conservative government. So we have a proud record there. We just don't want to clobber people and their bills in a difficult time. Now, on honesty, absolutely honesty is important. Honesty is important. So I'm surprised that you say that, because your Lib Dem candidate stood up with a placard to say he'd oppose development on Hall Farm You're now rowing back on that, and I understand it's going to be in your new local plan, which you're putting to the people. You're saving for it for after the general election. That's not honest. You know what else? What else is dishonest is Clive putting Wokingham on as his address on the ballot paper, even though he doesn't live in the constituency, and that's not his correct electoral address, postal address.
Thank you very much, Lucy. We are now coming to the time of the closing speeches. The closing speeches are 2 minutes each, and we are going to go in reverse order from the opening speeches. So, Prue first and along the table. Thank you.
Thank you. So firstly, thank you everybody for coming to listen to us tonight. And thank you for your questions, which have raised some important issues. I'm sure there's a lot more we could have talked about. I'm hoping that I've managed to convey Clive's position. Clive has spoken to thousands of residents, as I said in the opening. And you have told him what's important to you, and we've talked about many of those things. Clive has lived here for 40 years. He lives in Early. He has put his postal address and his postcode on the ballot paper. It's there for you to see. It was in the constituency until the constituency boundary was taken away from under him in January for the new constituency. So up until January, it was in the constituency. It's a damn sight nearer than Banbury, which is where I believe the Conservative candidate lives. Clive sees you as his friends and neighbours. He wants to make a difference for you, and he wants to help this community. And from his campaigning and his work as a councillor and as leader of the council, he knows how hard people are finding things after 14 years of Conservative government. And if the Conservatives did know how to fix things, they've had 14 years to do it. Why haven't they done it already? The country's crying out for change. We've all had enough, and we know we can't go on like this. Clive would be a full-time, hard-working MP. He would not have any other jobs. He'd fight for our community, and he'd prioritise the issues that you've told him matter the most, and he will try to support you as much as he possibly can. So thank you for listening to me and the other candidates, and I hope you all have a safe journey home tonight.
Thank you all, and I echo what Prue says, thank you for coming along. I've lived in Wokingham and around Wokingham all my adult life. I've had some great times here. I've seen the town change dramatically, and some things need to be picked up and taken forward. Things that I would look to see to be an MP and judge me on a success was at the end of Parliament, no food banks, no homelessness here in Wokingham. A technology hub where we invite and we bring and we become the global hub of the world in terms of looking at what we need to put into the UK. And that's relatively easy to do. It just needs desire. But I would work full-time, tirelessly, to put into place what you need. Respond to every email in terms of what context you need to see from Wokingham to that evolve. And to look at something for the next generation, whether that's affordable housing or the kids. What do they have? What's in place for our next generation of voters? Those individuals here, the 18-year-olds, the 19-year-olds, the children, they've got houses. They've got nothing else to go to in terms of that aspirational sprawl. So I would work tirelessly to ensure that Wokingham is front and centre and you as constituents are front and centre. And like Clive, I would only be working as an MP to put you first and foremost. Thank you.
You have come here tonight because you care about the future of Wokingham. And on the 4th of July, you will have a choice. You have listened to arguments tonight, and between now and polling day, there will be plenty more on the television, on radio, and in the papers. And I'm sure you will speak to family and friends about the future they have in mind for this country and for our constituency here in Wokingham. In the 14 years we have had a Tory government, can you think of anything that has got better? Schools are now worse for children. There are fewer police on our streets. NHS waiting lists are stretching to the longest ever recorded, and it feels like the country is on its knees. I think the choice is clear. that on the 4th of July, what we need is a Labour government. In Wokingham, that will mean change. You've never had a Labour MP. So what you need to do is make a choice about what you want to say about the future. Whether you want to vote for change and vote for a Labour government that will rebuild our national confidence, kickstart a decade of national renewal, put 13,000 more police officers on our streets, put 6,500 more teachers in our schools, give us 40,000 more evening and weekend appointments for the NHS, rebuild our economy and keep bills down, and make sure that we can again have pride in Britain. Or you can vote for more of the same with the Conservatives, or vote for no change at all with the Liberal Democrats. I know I believe we still have great days ahead of us. I know that Wokingham can be better. So I ask you to put your trust in that, to put your trust in me, and vote Labour on the 4th of July. Thank you.
It's a huge honour to stand to be your MP for Wokingham. From Finch Hampstead to Wargrave, Swallowfield to Remenham and across Wokingham town, people have told me of their excitement about voting for a fresh, dynamic new MP who has the values and ability to really make a difference. We have an amazing community here. You're all in this room or watching online because you care, and that's really inspiring for me. My family and I are really happy to be making Wokingham our home. As Conservatives since 2010, we've significantly grown the economy, faster than our peers in Western Europe. We have high employment and high wage growth. We've lifted school standards, cut crime in half, and rapidly decarbonised without overburdening people. We delivered the fastest vaccine rollout, furlough, and huge support for people's energy bills in times of great disruption for everyone. We've led support for Ukraine, we proactively defend our national security, and we fiercely advocate for peace, freedom, and prosperity abroad. Yes, there's still much in government that isn't working as it should. I know that, I'm frustrated by that, and I'm determined to fix it. We do need a political renewal, and now this is about the future. We can't regress to left-wing policies that would stymie our economic growth and undercut our ability to afford excellent public services. That's why I'm determined to step forward now to make government more effective and deliver that bright new future for Wokingham, our villages, and our nation. I'm very grateful for your support.
Well, now our evening event is drawing to a close. I do want to again thank our candidates. We appreciate your time and your contributions this evening and being with us. So thank you, and thank you again for your willingness to serve. So let's express our appreciation for your time. Tonight for all your questions. I'm sorry we didn't ask all the questions, but we hope we drew out the key themes, and so each person who was able to ask a question was speaking for many, I'm sure, so thank you for that. Thank you again to All Saints for hosting us this evening. That's been brilliant. And I want to say a special thank you. There's two people down here that you can't see but have been very critical to me, and that's the timekeepers. Particular thanks must go to Father Richard Lammy and the planning group, which are over here. I have to say say that I can tell you that Father Richard sprang into action as soon as the general election was announced and messaged me almost straight away and said, would I be willing to do the hustings? So I'm glad we were able to work out a date. But I know that the team have been working really hard behind the scenes to organise the event, not only in the run-up to this, but even tonight, sorting through questions and things. So thank you very much again for all your hard work. That's much appreciated. And thank you to you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your active participation in our democratic process. I think it was mentioned right early on in the evening, these are precious things and we must not take them for granted. So thank you for being here, that's really important. And so our evening draws to a close now. I pray that you have much to reflect on. I'm sure there are other things you will want to read and to inform yourself about. But I pray that you will be voting on the general election and encouraging many others to do so too. So thank you again for coming tonight. Good night and have a safe journey.